Right, welcome to part 2 of lecture 15-A. So, a bond that is sold or issued at a price that is different from its maturity value is either going to be sold at a premium or a discount. So, a bond is issued at a premium when it's issued at a price higher than the maturity value, and it's issued at a discount when the premium and discount when it's issued at a price below its maturity value. If it happens to be that the market rate is exactly the same as the coupon or the stated rate on the bond, then it will be issued at par. Okay, so just to be clear, a bond that has a maturity value or a face value of $1,000, and if it sells in the marketplace for $1,000, then it is issued at par or trading at par if it was sold after its initial issue. Okay, so over time, then you can imagine that the maturity as the bond approaches or gets close to its maturity date, then the price of the bond is going to be closer and closer and closer to its actual maturity value, because the only difference between the maturity value and the price of the bond is reflected in the difference between the interest rates, so the stated rate versus the market rate of interest, and that is compounded by the number of interest payments that are made over time, right? So if there's only one or two interest payments left, then even if interest rates are a couple points apart, stated versus market, the effect of that difference is only going to be that amount times one or two interest payments, not a huge deal, and therefore the price of the bond is going to be much closer to the market value. So I mean, let's look at just looking at something over time. Let's say a bond is sold at a premium. Change colors here. So the bond is sold initially at a premium. So this is the face value down here, $1,000, and it's sold for $1,100 or $1,110, whatever, at premium. Well, over time, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 10. Let's say it's a 10-year bond. Over time, the value, the price of the bond is going to zoom down to the maturity amount on the maturity date at 10 years time. Okay. Likewise, if it's sold at a discount, it'll do the same thing to kind of close in on that maturity price. So, based on that, let's just take a quick look at this chart here to try to cement our understanding of premiums and discounts and so on. So a bond, when the stated interest rate is 8% and the market rate is 8%, then the bond is going to be issued at par value, right? But if the bond pays 8% interest, but the market rate of interest for bonds of that kind is 9%, right? So this bond pays less than what the market is demanding. Therefore, the market isn't going to pay as much to buy the bond in the first place, and therefore we would expect the bond to sell at a discount. In other words, it's priced below the maturity value. So if it's $1,000 maturity value, the bond might sell for $980, let's say. Conversely, if the bond pays more than the going rate of interest, you would expect that someone would be willing to pay more upfront for that bond, and therefore it would sell at a premium. So let's take a look at this by doing some demo problems. So determine whether the following bonds payable will be issued at par value or maturity value, at a premium or at a discount. So the market rate of interest is 7%, and Canuck Corporation issues bonds payable with a stated rate of 6.5%. Okay, so it pays less than the market. The market, in other words, is not going to be happy with the rate that this pays, and therefore will bid the price of the bond down, and so it will be issued at a discount. B. Euler Inc. issues a 7% bond when the market rate was 6 3/4. So now the market is happy because the bond pays more than the going rate of 6.75%, and therefore they will bid up the price, and the bond will sell at a premium. Leaf Corporation issues 8% bonds when the market interest rate was 8% even. So the market rate is the same as the stated rate, and therefore the bond will sell or be issued at its par value. And Canadien Corp issues bonds payable that pay stated rate of interest 7%. At the date of issuance, market rate was 8 1/4. Therefore, the market is going to be very disappointed in these bonds. kind of like they are with the hockey team right now. And they will be issued at a discount. Okay. Now recall, a little bit earlier on in these notes, we talked about how bond prices are quoted as being out of 100. So basically, what that means is, if we have a bond here with a maturity value of $100,000 and it's issued at a bond price of 98.5, then what does that mean? That means that this company, when they issue the bond, they receive 98,500. Okay, so when you talk about the bond being bond prices being quoted as as being out of 100, then basically what you're saying is it's kind of like the percentage of the maturity value. So this is the bond price, and it's just the convention that we use, being out of 100, nothing special. So a $100,000 bond issued at 103.8 means that it 103,800 means that when they sold it, it was sold at a premium, $103,800. Another discount, $92,600, and a premium, $102,500. Okay. So, for which bond in the previous question will Allied Telecom have to pay the most at maturity? Well, it turns out this is a bit of a trick question, because when they mature, they all pay $100,000. Okay, so at maturity, all bonds pay the same at maturity, and that is $100,000. Okay, so if you're not given the bond price, but you're given the market rate of interest and the stated rate of interest on the bond and the number of years and the number of interest payments per year and the present value, like the maturity value and all that other kind of stuff, can you calculate the price of the bond? And the answer is yes. Using your handy-dandy Texas Instrument BA2+ calculator, you would use the following keystrokes. So, with these facts, that's the maturity value, coupon or stated interest rate. Coupon is another word for stated interest rate, 6%, 10 years. Assume here that we've got payments every 6 months. So it'll be 20 payments over the 10 years. The market rate of interest is 5%. So right off the bat, we know that the bond is going to sell at a premium, right? Because we've got the coupon rate 6% higher than the market rate of 5%. So bond is the present value of all the bonds. The bond price is the present value of all the bonds cash flows discounted at the market interest rate. So we know then 20 periods, as your calculator thinks of them now, right? A period is just the period of time in between interest payments. The interest payment per period is going to be the maturity value, $6 million, times the annual rate of 6%, the coupon rate, right? So the bond pays the stated rate. It pays what's printed on the bond certificate, not the market rate. So that's what the bond pays, 6%, 6 months over 12. So for half a year. So twice a year, the bond is going to pay $180,000. And the market rate now for half a year is the 5% annual rate divided by 2, or 2.5%. So inside your calculator, you can use the following keystrokes. 20, and then you hit N to reflect the fact that N being the number of periods, then 2.5, and then push the I/Y, interest rate per period. And this is now the market rate. Okay. So just want to emphasize that. This is very important. We're talking about the market rate for that particular one. The interest payment is this 180 that we've calculated, and so we've used the stated or the coupon rate to calculate this payment. So we type 180,000, hit the payment button, PMT, and then the maturity amount, $6 million, and then FV for future value. Okay, so that's what it's going to be at the future. That's its maturity value. And then we say compute the present value. And if you've done it all correctly, you should get $6,467,675. So that's a quick whirlwind tour using the Texas Instruments BA2+. If you've got another kind of calculator, you'll have to figure it out on your own. But work at it until you get this this particular answer here, and then you know you've got the process down pat. Okay, so corporation decides to issue bonds. They go and print them up. They sell them in the marketplace. A lot of other kind of good stuff. How do we go about actually doing the journal entries to record this? So let's take the simplest example, which is bonds issued at par and on an interest date. So they're issued on the date, or 6 months from the very first interest payment. So on the date of issuance, the corporation receives cash because they're selling these bonds. So they're going to debit cash for $1,000, let's say, and they're going to credit an account called bonds payable. Okay, now, so 6 months later, exactly 6 months later, is an interest payment date, and we'll assume that these bonds pay 6%. So the corporation then is going to record interest expense because over the past 6 months they've had the use of this money. They've been incurring interest expense, right? That's the basically what they're paying to rent this money, if you will, and that's going to be maturity value $1,000 times annual rate of interest times 6 months over 12, or $30, and credit cash. And then when the bonds mature, 5, 10, 20, 100 years later, whatever, they're going to debit bonds payable for the maturity amount, $1,000, and they're going to credit cash. So they're basically reversing this entry. So if you look at these three entries, just kind of as they're sitting there, they kind of tell a bit of the story of the bond, right? Borrowing the money up front, paying the kind of semi-annual rental fee to rent the money, and then basically unborrowing or returning the money at the end of the day. That's, when you really get right down to it, that's all that's going on here. So let's do a couple of problems to work at cementing this. Hunter Corporation issues a $500,000, 6.5% 10-year bond payable on January 1st, 2010. This is when they issue it. Okay. Journalize following transactions, include an explanation. Well, I'm not going to bother with explanations. So let's journalize the issuance of the bonds payable at par on January 1st, 2010. So 1 Jan 2010. Issue the bonds cash. They're issued at par, which means we're going to issue them at the same price as the maturity value, $500,000. And we're going to credit bonds payable. All right. B, payment of semi-annual cash interest. The first interest payment, July 1st, 2010. Okay, so 1 July 2010. Pay interest, therefore, interest expense, and that would be $500,000 times 6.5% annual times 6 over 12, because it's a semi-annual interest payment, and that works out to $16,250. So debit interest expense, credit cash, $16,250. And finally, 10 years down the road, on the 1st of January 2020, or December 31st, 2019, whatever, we unborrow by debiting the bonds payable and crediting cash at the maturity value of $500,000. Okay. Next question. Sonic Drive-Ins borrows some money by issuing $2 million of 6% bonds payable at 96.5. How much cash did Sonic receive when it issued the bond payable? Okay. So, well, $2 million was the maturity amount, but they did it at 96.5. So, doing the math, they actually collected $1,930,000. 2. How much do they have to repay? Well, they repay the maturity value, which is $2 million. And 3, how much is the interest payment every 6 months? Well, maturity value times 6% times 6 over 12, $60,000. And we'll carry this on in part 3 of the lecture.